In honor of Black History Month, welcome to a chat with Black academics researching cybersecurity. We will start by introducing our panelists.
I will start off with George Higgins, who is a professor of criminal justice at the University of Louisville Department of Criminal Justice. His research focuses on testing criminological theories and organizational theories applied to substance abuse, cybercrime victimization, race and ethnicity differences, criminal justice organizational issues. He is the author of more than 200 peer-reviewed scholarly journal articles and 10 books. He is the recipient of numerous awards. That is our first panelist today, George Higgins. And we have Tanya Davis, is a scholar practitioner in the field of psychology who divides her time between teaching, research, and clinical practice. She currently serves as an assistant professor and program coordinator in the psychology and counseling department at Alabama A&M University. She is a certified school psychologist, supervising licensed professional counselor, and a certified forensic mental health evaluator. Her educational training includes a BS in sociology from Auburn University, MS in counseling psychology from Alabama A&M University, MS and PhD degrees in school psychology with a certification in psychometrics from the University of Alabama. Her research agenda focuses on psychological assessment, technology-infused mental health intervention, biometrics and coaching, and her research in the area of virtual career mentoring for African-American college students has been funded by the National Science Foundation. She is also the co-writer of a national blog for Psychology Today. Next, we have Lucy Sato, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology, Social Work, and Criminal Justice at Lamar University in Texas. Her work has been published in the Journal of Information and Knowledge Management Systems, Journal of Cybersecurity, Education, Research, and Practice, African Social Science Review, Criminal Justice and Behavior, International Journal of Law, Crime, and Justice, the Rutledge Handbook of Africana Criminologies, Crime, Mental Health, and the Criminal Justice System in Africa. She has co-authored a book on cybersecurity education and careers with Roman and Littlefield. She teaches cybersecurity, cybercrime, digital forensics, corrections, and class, race, gender, and crime. Then we have Katorah Williams, who is a PhD student who received her Bachelor's of Science in Neuroscience and Psychology from Temple University and a Master's of Science in Criminal Justice from Westchester University of Pennsylvania. For the last 3.5 years, she has been working as an NSF graduate research assistant for the CARE Lab, conducting research on social engineering, the use of experiential learning in cybersecurity education, and adversarial decision-making. More recently, she helped organize and participate in the CARE Lab's summer and collegiate social engineering penetration test competitions. So far, she has published 5 papers on these topics and presented at numerous conferences, both domestic and international. Currently, she's working on the prospectus for her dissertation, which develops a theoretical framework to explain why people engage in lateral surveillance. Her research interests include privacy and surveillance, critical criminology with a focus on Black feminist theories, social inequality, and street smart. In her free time, she enjoys listening to music, gaming, and spending time with her family. And last but not least, we have Tessa Cole, ABD, is a graduate candidate at the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology at Georgia State University. Her areas of interest are cyber victimization, revenge pornography, sexting, specifically among adolescents, and online fraud. She is published in Victims and Offenders with several forthcoming articles in peer-reviewed journals. In 2018, she was awarded the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga Department of Social, Cultural, and Justice Studies Most Outstanding Graduate Student. She received the Andrew Young Dean's Fellowship Scholarship at Georgia State University from 2018 to 2021. Additionally, she earned the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology Graduate Teaching Award at Georgia State University in the spring of 2021. Currently, she is researching perpetrators' decision-making and behaviors on various online forums. So I'm going to make sure that all of our panelists can share their feeds. So give me 1 second, folks. All right, so there we go, working my way through the list. All right, so folks, can you start trying to share your feeds? If not, I'm still working my way through. So give me a few seconds. All right, I think I got everybody. There we go. When technology works. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. And I'm super, super excited. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you all for a long, long time. I've known many of you for a while now. So thank you for taking the time and coming out. In the interest of time, I have some discussion points already. I want to just start asking my questions. I'm gonna, just to ensure that we don't talk over each other, I'll name you and you can give me your thoughts or feedback or responses, and we'll take it from there. All right. So one of the things that I'm curious about, I always love to know about, and I'm sure our attendees would love to know about, is tell us a little bit about your work in the area of cybersecurity. I'm going to start with you, Tanya. So if you could share with us what you do.
Well, thank you, Dr. Reggae, for inviting me. I'm so happy to be on the panel of such wonderfully accomplished folks, I tell you. So glad to be here. So my work mostly deals with cognitive variables that lead to decision making. So for example, I'm very interested as a result of a situation with my mother, who is in her 60s, who was a victim of spear phishing, right, from her bank. And so that really got me interested in understanding what are the variables that make me or lead to someone deciding to click a link or not. So most of my work now is really looking at attentional variables. How much attention do we give to things? Also looking at various biases, right? In my world, psychology, we're always talking about anchor biases, selective biases, and how much attention we give to them and how they influence our decision-making at the end. So mostly what I do now in the area of psychology is looking at or bringing in technology-infused mental health interventions. When you think about telemental health, my job as program director is to train students on how to teach people how to solve their problems, not to think for them. So now that we're in a pandemic, we see more telemental health and telehealth options available. So that's mostly what I'm working on now, just making sure that students, when they are performing during their internships, that they know how to be safe, that they're delivering services ethically, because now we have informed consents that have to include technology-infused services. So all of those kinds of things are what I'm spending my time working on now, on top of virtual mentoring kinds of things. So that's a little bit about my work.
It's fascinating stuff and very relevant, right? Especially, I think the pandemic has just made things a whole lot more interesting. George, can I trouble you to share with us a little bit more about your work?
Okay, well, before I do, congratulations, Tessa.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Much well-deserved. My work is not security oriented in the traditional sense. My work is more cybercrime, cyber victimization. I am somebody that will focus on more of the socio-psychological, criminological, theoretical premises as to why somebody's doing something. But here recently, it's been more about what happens to the person on the other end, the victim, what's going on with them, what helps, what do they do in order to self-protect or in order to better realize that this is about to happen. And as it so happens, Tanya's research is very similar to mine, but not as specific. We tend to follow similar paths. The interesting thing about that is that when I got into this way back. And this was right around 2001. But people don't always realize that in the 1990s, this kind of research was being done Dick Hollinger has a book on this. Richard Hollinger has for University of Florida has a book on this, and it's copyrighted in 1997, where they're talking about these kinds of issues and they're starting and in their infancy. And it was interesting that I started thinking about people writing op-eds about this kind of stuff being, oh, it's just old wine in a new bottle. And it's like, we're seeing things from a victimization perspective that we've never seen before. And from a perpetrator perspective, wow, any kind of gimmick that we got to stop it, they seem to got something to top it. So it's constantly moving and developing. And this is stuff 80s and 90s. They were starting to work with this stuff. And now look at where we are. This thing's picked up so much speed that it's just amazing. So I'm just thrilled to be able to have a little piece of this and to see new young scholars come along and really start to take it to the next level. But that's me. I'm about cybercrime, cyber victimization, and I'm applying criminological theory. And I just put a little twist in there. It's like I'm always looking for the next greatest little statistical deal in order to kind of whip something in there to look at it just a little bit differently than what it is that we normally do. Logits, I'm tired of logit regression, but I'm interested in how do I do something a little bit differently.
That's cool. That's cool. And you're right. Speaking of which, I was actually considering University of Florida as a place where I should do my PhD, but didn't happen. But I think that's a nice segue, which we'll use, George, which is the next generation of scholars. And you congratulated Tessa. And if people are wondering what that was all about, Tessa recently defended her prospectus. So she is now a PhD candidate. No pressure, Tessa. It's wonderful news. So I want you to share with everybody, what do you do? What about cyber fascinates you?
So I actually, I fell in love with cybercrime after watching a documentary called I Am Jane Doe. And I know that that's like very specific for like human trafficking survivors and also Section 230. But there was like, I guess, a little piece of Section 230 that's kind of like lit my fire. So I enjoy, all ethically, embedding myself within criminal networks to figure out what characteristics and tactics that they use to defraud unsuspecting users and also each other, because I believe that ultimately they're not really that sophisticated. But again, that's just a hypothesis. So again, I enjoy embedding myself. And so I've researched everything from like revenge porn to online fraud. And I truly think that we're sometimes overthinking the cybercrime offender's ability ultimately. And I don't want to be like that person that's like victimization's, on the victim. But if we can just educate people more on what's going on, then we can protect ourselves better from them. But so that's what I do.
Yeah, and very important work, right? So more and more needs to be done in that space. From one graduate student to another, Katora, can you share with us the work that you are doing? I know it all too well. I'm a huge fan, of course, but let's let the others find out.
So I primarily work in the realm of social engineering, which is pretty much non-technical cybercrime. Scammers, pretty much. One of the main points of what I do is educating or figuring out ways to put social engineering education in the classroom. So that way we are training folks to be able to recognize when they are potentially being scammed. So right now, I primarily work on the offender side, I guess. Even though I do research with Dr. Reggae about social engineering and putting it in the classroom, we also host competitions where people act as social engineers. So I spend a lot of time interacting with both professional social engineers and people who want to try a hand at it, which is really funny because my initial interest in terms of graduate education was on liars and manipulators. So like I'm right where I guess where I was supposed to be. in a weird way. So that's primarily what I do. And then like my own personal work is on surveillance, which is kind of in the realm. It's not necessarily cybersecurity, but it does involve a lot of technology. So I'm doing a lot of research right now on lateral surveillance and social media.
Yep, and it's fascinating stuff, actually, Katora. You're right, there is a lot of overlap there. So looking forward to seeing what's coming next from you, for sure. And Lucy, I've known you for, I think, the longest out of, in this group, I think. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and tell us a little bit about that book as well. So.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Onshore, for having us. I mean, this is a very rare opportunity, and I'm trying to make the best of it. I'm so excited to meet each and every one of our panelists. And I believe that networking is the key, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. I first got involved with the field of cybersecurity when I attended a workshop in Lubbock, Texas. I had gone on a conference presentation, and somebody invited us all-paid trip to Lubbock, Texas to attend a workshop on cybersecurity. And one of the things I picked up there was like, this is a very big field. I'm doing my PhD in criminal justice, so I was trying to connect the dots between criminal justice and cybersecurity. So I found out that there is a huge skills gap in cybersecurity as at that time, and this was in 2014, I believe. I attended this workshop. So after I came back from the workshop, I started writing my dissertation, and you know how it is, you go from the whole big thing to this tiny little piece where you now hone your skills. And I got very excited as I was reading about the skills gap. I'm like, I think there's something we can do about that. So my typical area of research, as it has developed from the time of my dissertation to now, is in cybersecurity education. Figuring out that there is a skills gap, I was really curious as to why there was a skills gap in the first place. How did this develop and what we can do about it? So my dissertation was about analyzing how the US has tried to fill that skills gap through education and through certifications and through training. And it led me also to NICE, where I met Onshore. I was really excited to meet her at that conference, knowing that there was somebody out there who was connecting cybersecurity and criminal justice, or had a connection between the two. So now I've published a couple of articles about cybersecurity education specifically, and my book, which just came out last Wednesday, is about cybersecurity education. Thank you. Careers in cybersecurity and digital forensics. And again, I was approached at a conference. Somebody said, look, we don't have anybody telling us there's no structured field. My husband has been looking for a job in cybersecurity forever, and he can't find a job because he doesn't know where to go. And that was what birthed the book. So the book is about really careers in cybersecurity, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. So thanks for the opportunity. Congratulations, Tessa. I'm really excited to meet other scholars doing wonderful things in their own way. And you can see it, they're just little pieces that fit together somehow. Thank you for having us on show.
Thank you for, coming here and I think I had mentioned, right, sort of my selfish interest for putting this together. And I've read, especially in academia, a lot of Black academics, students just leaving, right, because they're frustrated and they're tired or things along those lines. And these are not things to be taken lightly. And so what I really wanted to do is start having these types of conversations. And I wanted to pull in the folks that I knew that we can, really start talking about these things, right? And continue to talk about these things beyond just Black History Month, because it doesn't stop after February, right? Like these are issues that, exist year round. They've existed for a while, long while. And so some of the questions that I want to, I guess, raise right now and have with you, conversation with you is, what are some of the challenges, right, that Black academics have faced? And what I love about this panel is that we're at different points in our trajectories, right? So we have a mix of a full professor, we have assistant professors, we have soon to be, assistant professors, or maybe if you want to not go into academia, although I think George is like, no, you want to go into academia because we've had these conversations before. So I'm going to maybe go in that sequence, and I'd love to start with George, if that's okay, and ask you, right, what are some of these challenges that you faced as a Black academic?
Oh, where do I start? But to me, you have to weigh the challenges with the benefits too. I love academia. I do. I worked in other sectors, and I can honestly tell you, from the nonprofit sector to the public sector, which are totally different. Nonprofit organizations versus Department of Corrections, that's not the same beast. But I can honestly tell you that the same issues in those two sectors are the same issues that you faced in academia. And the cool thing about academia is that I got Christmas, summer, spring break, and a few other days sprinkled off in there. Now, that being said, there are some real challenges. There really are. I happened to walk into a department where there was only one other Black person actually that was on faculty, and she had moved on quite some time before me and did not earn tenure. So at the time, I came into my department 30 years in its existence, and there had not been a Black person been tenured yet in that instance. So it was one of those things where I was grabbed by some folks real quick that said, watch out for that department. And I was also grabbed for some folks in the department saying, watch out for those people that say, watch out for that department. And I was like, okay. So basically, all y'all get away kind of a situation. But the issue comes is when that starts to happen, you start to wonder, where's your support going to come from? Because this is not something that can be done by yourself. It just can't. Then also when you're looking for that kind of support, I had to make a decision as to how much I was going to take. So I was determined that this is what it is I wanted to do. I was going to take as much as I could take. And I did. So it was a situation where it's like I was told early on, you got to do the 2-2-2. And then a week later, someone said, no, you need to do the 3-3-3. And then someone said, do the 4-4-4. And I was like, fine, whatever. And I said, well, the last person wanted to come to me and say, no, you need to do 5-5-5. And I responded with, I looked at your Vita and you haven't done 5 in 20 years. So, and that stopped all that. It was that kind of an issue. But also too, I'm a competitive kind of person. So I wanted to see one, and I wasn't competing with anybody else or competing with what someone else said. I was always competing with myself. I always wanted to know what I could do. What's the limit that I could get? How far could I go? And that has truly been the motivator for me and has allowed me to actually start to overcome some of the issues. Because even as a full professor, you might be sitting on top of the heap at the professor totem pole, but the reality is that those issues didn't go anywhere. There's always folks that are going to be questioning, well, do you belong? And do you do this? And then let's add cyber in front of whatever that you do. And then all of a sudden it's like, and now he's doing that cyber stuff. And I'm like, okay, fine. You come call me after you get your identity stolen then, okay? And then we'll talk. We'll see how important it is then. Those kinds of issues then come up. So it comes down to how much do you want to take? And then how much are you about what it is that you know about yourself? And how much do you want to push yourself? I've always been a rather anxious person. So when I hear Dr. Regay talk about the publications, is like, but you all don't know that. And when I started, it was not you email your stuff. No, you made photocopies and mailed it, and you were ready to, like, you know, to jack the postal person, like, where's my letter? Where's my letter? Where's my letter? You know, about that kind of stuff. So in order to avoid that, and I say all that in jest, but there's some seriousness to it too. But to avoid that, I would just start writing more. So this way I wasn't running down the hallway to go to the mailbox. And then when it all became electronic, in order to avoid the email, I would pull up my Word document and start writing. So that way it's like I'm always writing. And then all of a sudden 222 started to go away, and 333 went away, and then 444 went, slow down, you're making us look bad. And then it was like, well, then I asked her, said, what happened to 555? And then so it became that kind of thing. So the challenges are there. The challenges of doing more are always there. But then also to well, what can they really do? You know, kind of a situation. So and then I spent a lot of time trying to diversify myself. And when I say that, I was always a believer in the interdisciplinary research process. My master's degree is not in criminal justice or criminology. My master's degree is in public administration. So I was like, okay, everything's got more than just this one lens to it. So then things really got weird, because all of a sudden folks left me alone, because I was working with the folks from social work, and I was working with the people in psychology, and I was working with the political sciences. And then all of a sudden, when I started working with the people from public health, I got the knock on the door. What are you actually doing? And I was like, I'm 222, you know, kind of thing. So those challenges are there. But I say that in order to say this as well. I have been lucky that I have had a good cadre of colleagues from multiple levels, multiple departments, including my own, that have shared what they know, mentored when they didn't have to, walked the walk when they didn't have to, and were willing to talk with me when they didn't have to. And I cannot thank them enough, because while those challenges were there, they still took me in, kind of a thing. So I can't I can't throw shade at the doorstep, because they were really there for me, and some of them opened up the door for me. So there was there for the support. That's why when Tessa gets it and goes ABD, shoot, you better believe it. You go, girl, shoot. I'm excited for you, because I can't wait to see what you do, because we don't support each other enough in what it is that goes on. So that's what I was always faced with, was the do more. And also too, last little tidbit is that I also wanted to go up for tenure and throw my dossier down and say, I dare you. And when I did, my chair looked at me, and I swear to you, she did this. She looked at me and she said, that's cool. And then 2 hours later, she brought it down and she said, it's not organized right. Yes, ma'am. But she took the time, though, to help me get it organized. So it's like perfect.
Sweet. See, I love stories like this, right? And this is, I think, more folks need to hear that. One of the reasons also that I think I had mentioned why I wanted to do this, because I wanted, you know, Katora and Tessa to see folks like themselves out already doing amazing things, that it is possible, that they do exist, that they aren't unicorns, right? And things like that. And so thank you, George, you know, for sharing your thoughts on that. I think that was very, very important. Lucy, I'm going to pivot to you. Can you share with us what you think some of the challenges are that Black academics face?
Sorry, I was muted. Well, one of the big challenges I've had really has been in self-doubt. So, for example, like George said, when he got there, he was the first Black professor. Same story here. And then I had people knock on my door and tell me, oh my God, I just had to come see who was this Black professor they got. in this department. Never before have they gotten a Black professor. So that in itself created another kind of pressure and started to create self-doubt. You now start to wonder, well, did they employ me because I was qualified, or did they employ me just because, you know, they wanted a Black face? But all in all, I have to toe the line with George and say that my colleagues have been very encouraging. For the most part, even though all those challenges exist, you know, as a Black professor, you're continuously having to do more. You want to prove, because of some of those doubts that are even in you, self-doubt, you want to prove even to yourself that I can actually do this. I belong here. You know, so one of the challenges is self-doubt. The second challenge I have was not knowing who to turn to if I had a problem. If I had an issue, I did not know who to go to. Not only because, I think that's a combination of being new as well as being in a field that is new and different, and also because I was Black. You know, I did not see many people who looked like me in the department. So what the university actually did, a good thing, is that they paired us with people, but they were from other departments. So while I had somebody to talk to, they were in another department, they didn't quite understand the unique challenges I had within my department. The other challenge I also had, and this particularly I'm still going through, is, oh, well, your research doesn't seem to be academic enough. You know, so all this research you're doing, it looks like your book, like, for example, my book, your book is a self-help book. It's not really a research, book. So you face all those kind of challenges. But what I would just say is, hey, for those who are your cheerleaders, hold on tight to them. Let them help you, let them, you know, show you the way, hold on tight to them. And those who are not, let them go. And eventually things will start to fall in place. And then for publishing again in that area, because it's a new field, I self-doubt again. Okay, since I've been told this is not academic enough, where do I stand for tenure? So those kind of concerns started to creep in. But eventually I spoke with my chair, I spoke with my dean, and they assured me that, oh yeah, people will tell you that, yeah, your research is not academic enough or one thing or the other, but we're here to support you. So when I say you have cheerleaders, hold on to those cheerleaders, you know, I know what I mean. So yeah, it's challenging, but it's also very rewarding. It's really rewarding. There's nothing like standing in front of people and telling them, learning from them as in students, as well as, you know, trying to tell them, do this and do that, or this is what we're trying to learn today. There's nothing more rewarding than when you hear students or you read your evaluations and you find out that you have actually made an impact in someone's life. It's a very rewarding field. So yeah, just keep trudging it on is what I would say, even though the challenges are there.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. And I think those are some common challenges, you know, that even I've experienced, right? I'm not Black, but as a woman, like a brown woman, I face similar types of things. And we've often, I mean, heck, we've bonded over some of these things, right? And I think we're each other cheerleaders, right? So, yeah, you know, so you're right. You're absolutely right. Tanya, how about you? What do you think? You know, from your experience, generally specific, right? What are some of the challenges that Black academics face?
Well, I would say my experiences are a little bit different than George's. I was a private practice psychologist and came to work at a HBCU, right? So where George had few faces, I have many faces. And so, well, George and Lucy, as a matter of fact. So the experience for me was a little bit different in that when you come to an HBCU, or speaking just my experience, there were faculty in place, and because I had experience, I was asked to come in and really become the program director over full professors and associate professors. And so that put me in a different kind of situation. And so when you're getting into a new situation, you always want to kind of survey the landscape, use the resources that are there. Sometimes there are things that's been happening that people say are policy, but they're not. So what I was facing was trying to work in a resource poor kind of environment, and then to move the program, bring some innovation, because I was the practitioner, right? So my program had a lot of academics who really hadn't been practicing. So it was almost this position of, who is this upstart? And mind you, I had been in practice probably 13, 14 years at that time. And so my experience was a little different. So trying to really morph into a professor, if that makes sense, from practitioner to a professor. And so learning, I think George kind of mentioned the tenure. Well, I was asking people, what do I need to do, right? What's the first thing? So the major challenge that I faced was really bringing experience. Oftentimes we want to bridge the gap between research and experience, right? But I was experienced needing to build the research in an academic environment. And so that was the first challenge, being a younger person. The next challenge was really where to go, what's clear, right? I knew I wanted to prepare for tenure, but I didn't really know most of the people. And in this way, George and I are similar. There were a few people that had tenure, full professors, hadn't published anything 10, 15 years. So where do you locate your resources? So what I wound up having to do, and I'll say this, I was taught early on, you have mentors and you have champions. And so the difference is this, and I always remember this. So anytime I can be a mentor and or a champion for someone, I try to do that. So the mentor is that person that directs and guides and supports and helps you. But that champion is the person, they're dropping your name when you're not around for opportunities, or they're in situations and they have, or cultivating an opportunity for you without discussing it with you, without you being around. They just kind of know. So I have been blessed and fortunate enough that I had those. I went to majority institutions for undergrad and graduate, and those folks were there. And so when I came, I said, hey, what do I do? We kind of formed a network. So what eventually happened is I would go around to different departments, and similar to George, I kind of formed this interdisciplinary connection, because once people found out that I had been a forensic evaluator, psychologist, that sort of thing, then they had these questions about what I was doing, or they wanted to add me to grants or things when they were trying to go after, they wanted a social scientist on their grant. So you'll find what's appealing to me about cybersecurity is that most of the time it's been studied from really a computer science perspective. Like that was the domain of computer science folks. Well, I had some questions, right? As a result of what my mother went through, I started thinking about biases and empathy and how folks made decisions, how she made decisions, and what could I do? And so, like I said, that's one challenge, or two challenges, I think. What I did is I continued to be friendly. I continued to just reach out. And that's kind of how I met Anshul, just kind of a by the way kind of thing, how we kind of connected. So I don't want you to think that there aren't going to be challenges. I think it's how you meet the challenges that's important. And my way of meeting the challenges was to really research and to build networks and kind of a cadre, as George mentioned. But publishing, and at an HBCU, I'm speaking for mine, I have colleagues at other HBCUs, but what we find the major challenge is service is expected beyond belief. But they also say we want research, and there's not this time or this discussion of how to not have so much research, not have so much service, that is, and to kind of sprinkle in research. Now that's what they say, But the reality is, when I go up, I've submitted my packet for tenure. The reality is, service is a small component. They want the research. So finding ways to balance that. So those are a few of the challenges I would say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tanya.
You're welcome.
And then we have, you know, the younger in their trajectories, right? So Katora, I'm going to go to you this time. You know, you and I have had, I don't know how many conversations about this. And I'm grateful for those, right, Katora, because I get to learn from you about these. And that was actually one of the, you inspired, you know, me to reach out and do this. So believe it or not, you know, for what I don't know if this carries weight, but you do have a powerful influence and you're very, very special and important to me. So, you know, so what are, you know, could you share some of the challenges at from a graduate student sort of perspective, especially also, right? What are some of the challenges that young Black scholars might be facing?
To be blunt, like, being Black is actually like the challenge. From seeing yourself, right? Like you walk in, I remember when I was applying, I went through went back like years to see how many Black students the programs had graduated that I was applying to. And for some of them, I had to go back like 10, 12 years to see when the last time they had graduated a Black student. And I was like, whoa. So like, there's that, right? Flat out the board. You get to these programs and you're like, well, who am I going to talk to? Like, who's going to know that when I make this look, who's going to catch the nuance, right? Or the cultural nuance there. But then there's the, like for me, I know at one point, you know, like one part of me is the cyber part, but then I also study street smarts. That's not something that people talk about. So when I say, oh, I want to study street smarts, I have a whole department looking at me like, what? Because nobody knows what street smarts is, because there's not enough Black faculty there. They recognize like, oh yeah, that's a thing. We have that. So like the kind of being put inside of a box, being like, oh yeah, she does that thing. Like we don't know what that thing is. And then you mix like, oh, she also does cyber. And we don't really know what that thing is either. So she does those two things. And so just put her in the corner and let her be by herself and we'll figure it out later, right? Or whenever I do something, having it the validity of it questioned. Like there's no way you actually pulled that off. Like, or, you know, I did. And so that's a huge challenge. It's just kind of always being questioned or second guessed for whatever it is that you do produce. Even if it's just in conversation. Like I remember making like a general observation about one of my colleagues' PowerPoint slide and having multiple faculty come up to me and be like, that was a really great observation, as if they felt like they needed to stroke me because they didn't realize that like, oh, she can talk this way and she can do the things that we do, as if like I'm not like everybody else there or something. So that's a huge challenge, is just getting over that but like the belief that everyone else's belief that you're not where you're supposed to be, or that you don't fit the mold, so there's no way that you can do the things that they expect you to do. And they just kind of extended to like a whole bunch of different experiences that I've had in my department, but all of it boils down to like, she doesn't fit the mold of what we think the PhD student should look like, should talk like, what they should study, how they should produce, what theories they should use, like all of these things. So from baseline, we're going to dismiss her. And whenever we do allow her to come up, we're going to question her to the hilt to make sure she actually knows what she's talking about. And it's difficult because you want the same respect that everybody else gets. And when you see yourself not getting that same respect, then it makes you like withdraw. And then, you know, anybody who's in grad school knows that as a grad student, that one thing you can't do is withdraw, because you're so reliant on faculty and everything to build your CV so you can go out into the world and be successful. So you can't be like, I'm not dealing with my department anymore because they don't like me, they don't trust me, they don't support me, they don't validate me. So I'm just gonna go in my corner and do my thing, because you actually need them. So it's like this weird relationship that's unhealthy. So that's about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Katora, you know, for the honest picture, right? And again, you and I have talked extensively about it. Tessa, also another, sort of graduate perspective. And what are your thoughts? What are some of the challenges that Black academics face?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a weird spin, and I promise I'll explain all of this. So I was adopted and I have 28 siblings. My parents had 2 children by birth and they adopted the rest of us. And the reason why I say this is I grew up not, and I know that people say, I don't realize like there's a difference in skin color, but I legitimately did not realize that until I actually went into like middle school, because I was homeschooled up until that point. Because of the way that my parents had raised us. And so the reason why I say that is because when I started applying for PhD programs, it always like, so my husband is white. And at the time he was my fiance. We were madly in love. We still are, but the fiance like stage. I started looking at PhD programs and visiting and doing interviews. And I distinctly remember at one very well-known institution, it's not the one I'm at right now, walking up and asking the receptionist, I was like, oh, I'm Tessa, I'm supposed to be here, I have an appointment, and her looking at me shocked because it was clear she thought I was white based off of the phone conversations I had with the department head and her and that sort of thing. So the reason why I say that is that sort of encapsulates my experience as a PhD student, showing up and not being welcomed from the beginning because they don't know who I am. And in that, I've had to figure out who I am outside of my family of origin. So there's a lot of things, at play. But so I guess the biggest challenge I would say would be my identity, not just as a scholar, but also as a person, because when people question your work, they're not just, I take it personally. Everything's a challenge to me, just like it is for you, Dr. Higgins. So I like everything's a challenge. If I can't do this, then I'm a failure. And so having to separate my identity from what I'm doing versus like who I actually am, and then also finding people that I can rely on. And so that's for me. And I will add this in too. So I, when I got my master's, I got it at a predominantly white institution in Tennessee. And I remember the first day I walked in to the classroom, all the students were like quiet. And it's because they hadn't seen even like a teacher's aide look like me in the criminal justice department. And so from that to just the different places that I've been, it's been hard because it's like you can't let them know that you notice that they are looking or saying or questioning, and having to keep your head held up high at the same time, not coming across as the mad Black woman. So that balance has just been very, very difficult, because sometimes you have to be like, no, I'm doing this. And it's not because you're a jerk, it's because you have boundaries and you have self-confidence. And so I've really had to develop that the past 6 months. And that's something that I'm going to continue to develop, because I have a little girl and I will not let anyone tell her who she is or who she will be. She will decide that. And so I think that's been my biggest push in my PhD, is there's a generation beneath you that has to see you succeed. So.
Yeah, well said, Tessa, thank you. And I'm sure, some of these things are maybe for our attendees difficult to hear or process, but again, just as a reminder, these are things that everyone on this panel experiences every single day, right? And so, I just want folks to be cognizant of that, right? Yes, this is again, for Black History Month, but it doesn't end, right? Once we're done with this panel, yes, folks have done sort of their due diligence. We're here, we're listening. One of the questions that I, will have for the attendees, and it's a rhetorical, we can't have an exchange here, but, how will you take what you've learned today from these experiences and be that, mentor and champion that Tanya was talking about earlier, right? Because you're part of the solution as well, right? So we need, it's a much bigger group that needs to come together to address some of these things. I want to take a little bit of a break because we have some stuff in the Q&A. So I'm going to read 2 questions. So we have a shout out from Sherry. Just want to celebrate my colleague, George. He's phenomenal. Thank you. This is excellent advice. And so I'll go to Sherry's question, but then we also have a question from Salima, who's actually an undergraduate student in my class. So we'll start with Sherry's question. How are you creating networks with non-Black scholars who can or will read or cite your work? Do you go to conferences, get on panels, and serve, chair, or discuss it? Send your work to them and ask for responses. You will need them to read and promote your work. So I'm going to open it up. Whoever wants to take that can, but let's spend about 2 to 3 minutes maybe about this, and then we'll continue to Salima's question.
Yeah, do all those things. In today's world, it's a little easier. You don't always have to do it conference-wise in today's world. As far as like getting people to review your stuff before it goes out, did I hear that correctly? Okay, you don't always have to do that. One of the strategies that I used especially when I was getting started, was that I would actually, if it's a specific theory that I was actually incorporating into the research, one of the things I would do is that I would actually email the theorist, or I would actually go and email some other people that have published in the area to ask them to read it. But here's the thing. That's a scary proposition, because you don't always know what you're going to get back, and you don't always know what they're going to take. So, but the thing is that the conferences is where a lot of folks actually, you do make that network at the conferences, and that is an art as well as a skill. And I'm just a people person, so I like people. So I'm okay going to a conference and like walking up to somebody that I don't know, but I'm also that guy that will go there and I will work really hard to actually meet 3 brand new people that I have never spoken to at all. I want to make sure that I meet 3 brand new people and truly get to know them beyond just their name, but spend time with them and do those kinds of things. The conferencing in that sense is very, very important. And with the recent pandemic, unfortunately, that's really stopped a lot of that kind of activity. And it'd be nice to actually see that come back. But even then, it's one of those things where you have to listen very carefully to what it is that people say, and then go back and research to see what they have done. So then you can actually see how you may be able to work with them, as opposed to just saying, hey, let's do some work together. Well, what have you done? Are you a literature review person? Are you a discussion person? Are you a statistical person, a theoretician? What do you really do in that sense? And then you kind of build a team around that kind of stuff is what it is that I see. So this way you can actually start to develop like that. And Cherie, it's one of the Cheries, probably. I hope that answered it.
Any other thoughts from anyone else? Thank you, George.
So yeah, I would definitely second everything George says. I would add, for me, my strategy typically is I'm a group approach now. Again, there are scholars where I am, especially in my department. And so we tend to just kind of, whoever is about to go up for tenure next, we just kind of work together and say, hey, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. So one approach is if you are a student and you guys are looking to kind of research something together, and somebody, like George said, he told you about the roles. Those roles, I think, can be applied as a graduate student, right? If you're a good statistician, or you're a good stats person, the other person is a good editor or a writer, I would say begin to put things out now. And if you're at those conferences, my students now, they don't always like it, but I really kind of force them to do research posters now in the research class. That's it's a key assessment that I'm kind of just putting in place, that they have to respond to a call for proposals. So, that's just something I'd say you could start now, building kind of a network with your research poster. And then when you go to conferences, take those things George said, meeting 3 people. Wonderful advice from a full professor there. I'm listening as well.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to go to Salima's question. Oh my goodness, we have a lot of questions. I don't know if we're going to get through the rest of our discussion points, but I do want to get into some of these. Lucy, maybe this is a question, given that the book that you mentioned that's coming out on cybersecurity careers. So this is a question from Salima, who's in my cybercrime class. She's asking, do I need a master's degree to advance in cybersecurity? What alternatives are there to a master's degree? Are they as good? And this is then we'll open it up to anybody else who'd like to chime in.
Okay. Hi, Salima. So to answer your question, it depends. So it could be yes and it could be no, but it really depends on where you see yourself in the next 5 years. So if you're looking at academia, of course, you have to get a master's degree and then proceed on from there to get a PhD or whatever you want to do from there. But if you're looking to work for the federal government, for example, a master's degree is advised because it kind of gives you a broader outlook to the cybersecurity field. But if you're just looking to get into the field right now, immediately after your bachelor's, for example, I would suggest before you finish your bachelor's, you can try and get a certification or two. But you have to do a little bit of research and figure out exactly where you see yourself in cybersecurity, because it's a very huge field, very huge field. So you have to figure out exactly what you want to do. Do you want to do network analysis, for example? Do you want to be a systems analyst? Do you want to be an investigator? And each of those roles requires certain skills. And once you can get those certain skills through certifications, you can get your foot in the door. There are two websites I would suggest. One is cyberseek.org. It gives you the different roles that are available and the kind of jobs, knowledge, skills, and abilities you need for those particular roles. So it helps you. It also tells you the kind of certifications you need to get in that role. So it depends on what you're trying to do. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? And then what exactly do you want to do? You have to do some research. Do you want to be an analyst, or do you want to be an investigator? Do you want to work in law enforcement as a digital forensics analyst, for example? So that helps you decide if you really need a master's. But generally you don't. But if you're looking to work for the federal government, I would advise getting a master's or advancing your career in cybersecurity. Does that answer your question?
I think so. And yes, she said yes. Thank you, Dr. Sato. So yes, thank you. Okay, so I have two questions that I want to loop with something I've been wanting to ask you, right? Which is, what more needs to be done, right? So we have some questions in here. Like Morgan asks, I'm white, so my question is, how can white allies support Black academics, right? So I want to, and then we have Adam, who's also in my class, who asked, what are some steps that chairs, like department chairs, can take to be better champions for African-American faculty, right? So what more needs to be done, be it for faculty, be it for graduate students, be it for undergraduate students, right? So what needs to be done? And I'm going to open it up to whoever would like to take it. George, go for it.
Knock on the door. It's that simple. Knock on the door. And do it unexpected. Just reach out and then listen. Because a lot of it, in order to get to the working side of things, that needs to be a safe zone first, and the ability to actually be able to share what is there with that person in order to actually do that, to actually get to the working part. I was very fortunate. As I said earlier, I had some folks that did that with me. They created a safe space for me. And then we were able to really start pushing things together. Before it was a little rocky, but we got there. So a chair, I've been vice chair of a department and chair at another institution. And I can honestly tell you the best thing to do is to manage by walking around. which means don't come hide in your office. Don't sit in your office. Every chair's got reports to write, and every chair's still got an active research agenda, and every chair has to deal with complaints. But walk around, knock on the door, and and oddly enough, just sit there and listen. And if you do that with all your faculty, then nothing's out of the ordinary. Nobody's getting preferential treatment, and everybody feels included.
Tanya, Lucy?
I was looking for the reaction to say, George, absolutely. Absolutely. George said it best, just knock on the door from a chair perspective. And I've not been a chair, I'm the program director of a program. Knock on the door, right? That's exactly what I did. I just reached out to George about doing something and met him for the first time as a result of Dr. Reggae, who was just really fantastic. And that's just not lip service. She really is. The way she kind of makes connections, really for no other benefit other than just making people connected, right? And then just kind of building this incubator here. So I appreciate her for that. But I agree with George, just making sure you knock on the door and listen. And I think most people are open, to wanting to help, but understanding also that I have a narrative and my narrative isn't your narrative and my narrative isn't complete. So that's really important that folks understand that the story didn't start with me and it won't stop with me. So sometimes people think they have one conversation and they hear one thing and that's enough. Well, it really isn't enough, right? So be willing to listen to multiple stories, multiple narratives that kind of string together and tell a story. Mm-hmm.
Lucy, did you want to add anything? You're unmuted, so yeah, okay. Okay, all right. Katora and Tessa, I'd love to get, from a student perspective, be it grad or at the undergrad level, right? What can we do to support Black students?
Let us in. Bring more of us in, right? Like you can't just, this goes for like graduate school across the board. The amount of Black students that are admitted every year is extremely low. Like you have to let us in first. If you want to talk to us, if you want to get to know us, if you want to expand the research base, if you want to start importing cultural nuances into the theories that are produced, into the research that's produced, you have to let us in because you're never going to know it until you start talking to us. So that's like the big thing. And then I think that when like Black students are reading, like in class, I remember reading articles and being like, like this is problematic, and people being defensive because it's a big name attached to this very problematic thing and like feeling like they need to defend the big name thing. And it's like, well, you could just drop the defensiveness and listen to what I'm saying. Because like the moment you start getting defensive, your ears are off. And so we're not like, nothing's going to ever get anywhere. So I think one, you have to let Black students, minority students in, let them voice their opinions, let them influence the research and how they want to approach the research, or just like the field in general. And then not be defensive when it's something you don't agree with or you don't understand, because there is like a common ground that often exists.
Going off of the let us in, I think that Katora had a really good point, because some of the platforms that I'm sitting on for like my cyber research, they come with, nuances that maybe it's a Gen Z and lower thing that only pick up on, but I feel like there's probably some cultural stuff in there too. And so I think that as researchers, we really miss out on picking up, the characteristics of criminals when you don't invite all parties to be at the table. And so I think that's pivotal. So thank you for highlighting that. And then the other is giving us the ability to use our imagination to explore. Don't, fixate us, or don't be fixated on what has been. And I think that's part of the problem, which is why we're not seeing more Black and brown individuals in these positions, is because we're so fixated on the past. I mean, cyber tells us that if anybody's watching, like it's it's not going to be the same. It's not the same. And so we have to transition with it. And then in that transition, we have to be willing, in my opinion, to allow those that were not invited before to be in the room.
And both of you, this is why aren't these graduate students amazing? Like, I am in awe every time I speak with them. I'm like, dang, right? But anyway, I'm allowed to say that in a webinar. But anyway, all right. But pivoting off of that, right? Katora and Tessa, you both highlighted on nuances, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because this was one of the questions, right, that I had for you, is how does being Black really give you that unique perspective, right, in studying cybersecurity? And you touched on bits and pieces of that, but I really want more detailed responses. I want to have a good conversation about that. I'm going to go back to you, Katora and Tessa, because that idea came from both of you. So, if we could start there and then maybe go to Tanya, George, and Lucy.
Well, I wasn't expecting that question. Wait a minute, I gotta think about this. Like for me, even like, especially with social engineering, a lot of it is language. And so you need to know, like, you don't use slang this way. Like, that's how I know that this is a scam, because that's not the right way that you use this word. But if you're not in that space, you wouldn't know that that's not what that word means. And I feel like, just for example, like being from Philly and people starting to use the word John all the time. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not, like, I know we say John doesn't have a meaning, but it does. And that's not how you use it, right? And so there's all those cultural nuances in terms of language, in terms of like how things are presented to you, that if you're not aware of it, you're not effective at either studying social engineering, and I'm only speaking on social engineering because that's the thing that I do, studying social engineering or being a social engineer in general, right? Like you've missed the pot because you didn't know what you were doing. So I think that's the big thing. And then in terms of like the research base, one of the things that I want to do is to study cybersecurity in street smarts and how that works. Like, what does street smarts look like in the digital space? What does social engineering look like in Black spaces? Like, how does all of this come about? And you can't do that if you don't have a connection to the Black community or to Black culture, or if you don't have a connection to Latino communities or Latino culture or Asian communities. Like, you have to start bringing in all of these different cultures if you truly want to make the impact that you want to make, because every culture has their own special nuances. And if you can't have white people writing about Native American culture because they don't know, or, you know what I'm saying? So you have to bring everybody to the table, and that's the only way you can expand the research base and truly make the impact that you need to be making. Did I answer the question?
Going off of that, again, I'm biased because my focus is online fraud, but I think online fraud sort of encompasses everything. So when you get into online fraud, why does it happen? Well, because you don't have the cash out methods that you need to have in order to get the money that you made from your drugs, from your gun purchases, so human trafficking. So that's why I'm obsessed with online fraud, because you get to do a little bit of everything, right? And so with that being said, all cultures, all ethnicities engage in online fraud to get whatever they want to get out of it, whether that be fraudulent documents for whatever purpose. I mean, you name it, right? And so if you do not allow, not just, and I know this is specifically Black academic focus, but all individuals to the table, you're going to, in my opinion, create a dark figure of crime, right? Because you're not allowing that discussion to be had to catch it. So there's that aspect. And then I think, can you remind me again, don't kill me, about the second part of the question? Or
Oh no, it was just, how does it influence your research or the way you carry out your research, or, all of those things?
So because of that, I'm at Georgia State. And so that's I like Georgia State in the instance of it's very diverse. And so I've been able to have mentees and also interns that have, at first I was like, hey, he wants to be my intern / mentee. And then it turned into, I have so many, I don't know what to do. But not train them, but educate them on, hey, this is how you systematically go about collecting data to the point where I've had several come back and be like, I wasn't interested in going to grad school. Now I want to go to grad school. And I'm still working with some of them that like graduated in their masters. They're like, hey, how does this work? Can I join this project that you're on? So that's been really cool. So I would say my students seeing me be a Black female, somebody that they can trust, an intern and mentor underneath, has really helped me stay the course on, I've got to graduate. I can't just do all this and then them see me be like, okay, peace. So
yeah, thank you. Lucy, George, Tanya, any extra thoughts on top of that?
I'll offer this. Tessa, you just outlined the 100% reason why I'm in academia. Because it's that to see those little light bulbs go on, and to see folks move on, carry on, and to help folks through. That's the whole reason why I'm a son of a teacher. So that's always been my heart, is to do that. But as far as how does it influence my research, I can honestly say in cybersecurity, it doesn't. It doesn't. To be honest with you, biological sex and gender does more than race ethnicity does. But when I'm doing race ethnicity, it's a different ballgame. So, but it is one of those things where, yeah, Tessa, this is why academia is the deal. Is because in no other work are you going to be able to truly mentor and, as Tanya said, champion somebody else and to see them go on that path as well. I mean, it's for the last 10 years, I think I've been like second to last or last author, because I got so many of the students that I'm trying to help bring through, because that's the way it needs to be. I need another journal article like I need a hole in the head, but I want them to actually come out and to start to do it and to show them. That's the whole reason to get up in the morning to do this. It's not about, for me, it's not about me, it's about them. So it's like, let's go to work that way. And that is more powerful than anything outside of any of the chirping or anything like that. To me, that's more powerful than any of that stuff. That matters. Like when we get off of this Zoom call, I'm on another Zoom call with one of my research teams, and then it's like, all right, what do we got? And they're all young ones. They're all PhD students, and they're PhD students. And I got one that's an assistant professor on that team. And it's like, all right, what do we got? What do we got to get done? Kind of thing. So it's constantly that kind of development. It was in a movie, actually. It was in a movie about blue babies. It was titled Something That the Lord Made. And Vivian Thomas, played by Mos Def, actually said, I like helping the young doctors along. And that was one of that stuck out to me, because that's what I'm about. I like helping the young folks along.
Yeah. So oh my goodness, we're at 7:15. This time's flying by, I know. But we have 3 more questions here. I'm going to read, I think, the one that seems to be the most pressing. It's an anonymous attendee question. Hello, I have an associate's degree in cybersecurity, and I am a senior currently working on obtaining my bachelor's in cybersecurity with a minor in risk management and insurance. I am a Black female and struggle with finding a support group, as I am not sure what I like to pursue within cyber. Do you all have any suggestions or advice? Whoever would like to take it.
I'd like to take that. So there are certain groups you can join that can provide you with some kind of support. One of them is called Cybersecurity. Remember Cybersecurity? Where Dr. Reggie spoke at Cybersecurity a few months back. That's one group. What they do is they mentor you. They have scholarships. There's a lot of stuff there on cyber that you can take advantage of. The other one is Wise Week. Is that how it's called? I'm sure. Women in cyber.
Yeah, I've heard WESIS.
Wise.
I'm going to put them in the chat box so you
Yes.
can focus on answering the question.
So that's another group that you can take advantage of. And then somebody asked me a direct question about how did I deal with walking into a room and everybody was white? How did I find who to trust? I mean, you have to trust your instincts and you have to observe a lot, and then you have to listen a lot. You have to figure out, how do you say, read a room. When you read a room, you'll be able to figure out who is for you. And sometimes it's not all about what they say, but about what they do. All right. So watch people, what do they say? How do they say it? What do they do is even more important than what they say. So you have to just trust your instincts and let your, and then you have to trust just a little bit, just trust a little bit, and like, if you don't know how to swim or you want to figure out the temperature of the water, you put your foot in first, right? Rather than just jump in completely. So you do things like that. Figure out who's on your side. And trust me, you will find out who is with time. And it takes time to build these relationships. It's not just automatic. It takes time to build these relationships. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Lucy. And I also put the list of women in cybersecurity and Cyversity in the chat box for everyone. So we can do that. We do have another question from Craig, who says, for those who have worked in the field and worked in academia, are the challenges as a minority different or similar?
I might take I haven't, so like I said, I have like a little bit of an unusual upbringing, but at first I thought I wanted to focus on inmate rights. So when I started my master's degree, I started at a male correctional facility in Tennessee. And basically all of the correctional facilities in Tennessee are not in they're in very rural areas. Okay. And so I was one of the few Black individuals working there. And I think it's about the same, but very different, because there's also like a prison officer culture that you follow too. So I was probably more miserable working in a correctional institution than anywhere I've been in my life before. But then again, I also was with 130 male inmates by myself for 12 hours a day. So there's that too. But I would say it has its own unique challenges. And again, back to what I said at the beginning about identity is very important. Wherever you go, you have to know who you are before you enter in, because whether it's an inmate or a colleague or a CEO, if you decide to go into the private sector, you're going to have to be able to not just defend who you are, but know who you are in order to show up for the job to do the best that you can. So.
Tanya, did you want to take that? Because I know you have the, practice, like, yeah.
I would say that being in private practice, and I still am in private practice, there is no difference from my perspective about the challenges that you face as a Black academic or as a Black school psychologist in private practice, right? When I would come for testing, or people would come in my office for testing, if they'd been on the phone and they got there, it was, so you're the person that does the testing? I am. So I didn't see that identity or perception about who I was. I didn't see that change. And I would even take it a step further to say that I saw and felt the microaggressions, right? Saw and felt them. So I don't see that it's different, but also, I'm older now, been in practice a long time. So just like there are seasons of change, I see seasons of differences in treatment, right? So now someone comes to the office, it's not a big deal. But 15 years ago was very different. So when you think about intergenerational learning or intergenerational kind of culture that we are in now, where there is much more inclusion, but still a long way to go. But for me, I didn't see the differences. Very much the same.
All right, thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
So we're wrapping up, and one of the questions that I like to sort of end with is, for those young minds that are out there, or also those that are interacting with young minds, right, in our attendees, in our audience here, what message do you have for Black youth who are considering cybersecurity, be it academically, industry, whatever it may be, who are considering that as a career, and anything else, right? Sort of closing thoughts as we wrap this up. Lucy, I'll start with you. Yeah.
Okay. I got a text a few days back, and it kind of summed up everything for me. As per, I mentioned some of this in my book, but just to cap it, it says, 1, have clear goals and aspirations. Don't doubt yourself. Know who you are, and just don't doubt yourself. Write out all your goals and have clear goals and aspirations. Become an expert in your field. Find that little niche where you can make a difference and become an expert in that. As you can see from these panelists, each of us has a different area of cybersecurity. So just have that particular niche and become an expert in it. I remember my pastor in Nigeria said, if you read about something 30 minutes a day, every day, in a year, you will become an expert. And I think that is true. I can see George nodding, so I think I'm on the right track. The third thing is note down your accomplishments. Never doubt what you have accomplished. Write it down and try and praise yourself, because nobody's going to do it for you. I'm not saying this with any pride, but with as much humility as I can. Just make sure you know what your accomplishments are, and don't let anybody put any doubt in you. Get a career mentor, get a coach, get a sponsor, champion, like Dr. Davis said, a champion and a, what was the other word you used? A champion and a mentor, I think. Mm-hmm. Make sure you get somebody who you can call, somebody you can hold hands with and say, hey, I'm going through this. Sometimes it could be your mentor, sometimes it could be your champion, but find someone you agree with and make sure you make that happen. Promote yourself. Make sure that you don't doubt your abilities anywhere, and make sure you're promoting yourself. And then the last thing I'll add is networking. Networking is very important. And I wanted to keep this for last because I wanted to tell a little story, not a long one. I met Anshul 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And this last conference I went to, she pointed me in a direction. She said, I was doubting myself. I don't even know if all this I'm doing is important. And she said, go see Dr. Brian Payne and connect with him. And I said, okay. So I practically stalked him at the evening panel, and I found him and I talked to him. But guess what? She connected me with Dr. Brian Payne. He connected me with somebody else who invited me for another panel. That person does not know me from Adam. So you see, all this started from me meeting Anshul. Now I'm meeting somebody who I completely don't know through Dr. Payne, and I appreciate all these opportunities and I do not take them for granted. So never ever, what's the word I'm looking for? Network. So somebody asked a question, how do I find women? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 women here, and you have one phenomenal man too. So, I mean, networking is very, very important in the field. Thank you.
And Lucy, as I said, Brian just gave us all a shout out. What a great way to spend a Monday evening. You all provided excellent insight and showcased your cybersecurity smarts. I'm looking forward to learning more from each of you in the future. Brian Payne is one of my favorite guys. So he's awesome sauce, right? But yeah, so I'm going to continue back to George, Tanya, Tessa, Katora. Closing thoughts, messages for young minds.
Hey, before I get to that, ask Brian if he's got his coin. He'll know what that means. We went to the same grad school. the thing is that Lucy basically said it. She said it all. I mean, it's right there. Network, find a mentor, and then find another mentor. And then when those two are busy, find one more mentor. Okay. So this way you start to build a support around you. And then after you have that in place, start building a team, and then build a team with different skills. So get somebody that's good at discussions and stuff. Like I said before, get the team together. And then once you have that team working, build another team. And so that way you're constantly moving back and forth between your teams, and you're constantly working on cool stuff, and you're staying refreshed. And try your best to get those two teams together, and they'll build teams with or without you in different configurations, and you'll start to see things really start to grow and start to take off, and you were a part of that. And that is, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, that's more gratifying than if I'm doing it. So it's like to see other people just start to blossom and actually figure out that they are the sunlight that they're supposed to be. So it's like, that's just that to me, that just sets it completely off. So that's, you see, I get excited about that. I'm sorry, but it's and it's not just the networking, but it's the team building. And that starts to build in support and development as well. My teams are awfully protective of one another. So that's the reason why when folks want to come into my teams, it's like, well, hold on here. Let me talk to them first and see what they want to do. But we're almost always open to like, let's go. But we always we always protecting each other's hearts like that. So it's that kind of development. One other little quick thing. When you start to publish, and this is coming from a journal editor hat that I had on for like 9 years as editing 2 different journals. When you start to publish, you need to develop what I like to call crocodile skin. Okay. The reviewers don't know who you are. The editor doesn't know who you are. They're not going to be nice. It's okay. Take it personal for 5 minutes and set it aside, come back to it a few weeks later and get it done. Okay. Even if it's a rejection, polish it up, send that puppy out somewhere else. If it's a revise and resubmit, do it. But you give yourself 5 minutes to take it personal. After that, it's time to get down to work. Okay. That's the way it works. I can't tell you how many revise and resubmits that's an editor in 9 years that I gave out and that they had truly earned and never saw those papers again. Okay. Crocodile skin. Don't get your feelings hurt. This is part of the game. Okay. Part of the game. All right. So just keep at it. Keep at it. I wish everybody luck. If you need me, Anshul's got my information. I'll shut up.
Tanya, Tessa, Katora.
Sure, I'll go. This is something, I tell my students all the time, document good ideas so you don't lose them. So I keep a book, if you can see it right by my bed. I have about 3, right? Stays by my bed. The other thing is live your life by design, not default. So when you know where you're going, distractions won't derail you. So often distractions get you off track, right? So I was working on a PhD and my father died in the middle, right? And so I understood that I needed to kind of take the time, but it wasn't something that derailed me, right? Life is going to happen. So let's be mindful. The other thing I say is stop reliving your failures, right? Psychologist talking to you. Stop reliving your failures, okay? Network in all directions. My students get sick of hearing me say that, right? Network in all directions. I might be at the grocery store. I never know where my next patient is coming from, or my next consulting kind of contract, if you will, is coming from. Might be at the grocery store talking to the manager about the fruit. Yeah, I've had that happen. Kroger. Hey, could you do a team building workshop for us? So be mindful. The other thing, from a psychologist's perspective, fill other cups in your life. It just can't all be about work. So fill other cups in your life. And finally, what's my other thing? Oh, as it relates to cybersecurity, there is a space, and I have to say, you hear me bragging on Anshul, I wanted to get involved because of the things that my mom went through, the empathy, the people when they've been a victim of, for her, in her case, and in my research, when folks have been victims of cyber crimes, they have so much guilt, and the guilt doesn't belong with them. So part of my work is really working with those victims and talking about empathy. I have a different level of empathy for them, and working with the churches, people don't have access to cybersecurity, trying to heighten their awareness. That's really important to me, and I feel like I'm giving back in the field. Spirituality is really important to me. And so that's what I would say. There is a space. Where I was going with this with Ancho, you can tell I'm old. Sometimes things just kind of, they flip away. She helped me to understand that there is a place for social scientists in the cybersecurity world. It just isn't cybersecurity people speaking about things. There is a space for social scientists to be involved there. So pursue cybersecurity, do well. And that's what I got to say.
Katora?
I would say
go ahead.
I would just encourage them to be willing to pivot. What your first dream and goal was might not actually be what's for you. I learned that the hard way after taking constitutional law 2 in undergrad. I was like, this is not for me, but I still want to do something legal. And looking back, if I had stuck with that and gone to law school, I know that like my heart/mind wouldn't be like, it literally, I know this sounds like super geeky, but I like get enjoyment from research on cybercrime and like cyber victimization. So being willing to pivot, allowing yourself to pivot, and having that desire to constantly want to discover more.
Katora?
Everybody already stole all of the good ones. But from a cybersecurity perspective, I just like to piggyback off of what Dr. Davis said and just highlight that cybersecurity is not inherently technical. There is a space for non-technical training, and people who do not have technical skills in cybersecurity. I do it. Dr. Reggae does it. So please, like, social engineering is just scamming. Right? There's nothing technical or inherently technical about running the scam. So if you are questioning whether you can actually do it, but because you think you can't because you don't know how to code, let that thought go. You can do it. Just go try it. In terms of just like, thoughts that you should carry with you, you're going to have doubters. You're going to have detractors. Just do it. They don't matter. Just do it. If you fail, guess what? We've all failed. My journey to getting here was very long and involved like a whole bunch of major changes. And I was halfway through a graduate degree in psychology, and I dropped out and started from scratch. Like you're gonna, like Tessa said, you're gonna pivot. Things are gonna change. Just go with it. Just do it. But the worst that can happen is someone tells you no, and then you just figure out your next step. So just try.
Great. Thank you so much. We have one comment, which I'm actually going to share in the chat box. Said, great panel, been doing InfoSec for 20+ years and still learning. They have a recommendation as a great group for networking and other resources, blacksincyberconf.com. So I'm going to put that in the chat box. But thank you, everyone, for coming out and for sharing your thoughts with me. This was wonderful. I think I chatted with Tessa earlier today. I'm like, this is the one thing that I was looking forward to today, because this was not work. This was a chat, right? This was like, I should have had my like lemon tea and I should have just sipped it and just chilled and hang. But this was awesome. And let's keep the conversation going. And thank you, each and every one of you. You have enriched my life in so many ways. George, I finally got to hang out with you virtually. I've been a fan for a long time. And it was literally a cold call, cold email. I'm like, hey, you wanna be on this panel? So you know, and Tessa and Katora, right? I'm like, oh, no, I want you, you know, it was more voluntelling for them. But, you know, and Lucy and Tanya, like we've had our various interactions, and here we are. All of us came together, everything aligned. And it was wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting this on. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure meeting everyone.
Bye-bye.